Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Giant's Healthy Innovators Live TV. My name is Barry Shrier, and I'm your host. I'm the founder of Giant Health. Giant is an acronym which stands for Global Innovation and New Technology. We're a global community of nearly 200,000 people around the world, everybody whose business is healthcare, technology, and innovation. And every week, we very proudly bring to you a collection of some of the most interesting and accomplished and dynamic and ambitious people who are at the forefront of innovation in healthcare. We're all setting out to make the world a better place. Our goal is to improve the health and the well-being of people around the world by accelerating the innovation and adoption of new technology and supporting healthcare entrepreneurs. So thank you to the many thousands of people around the world who dial into these weekly Healthy Innovators TV shows. We appreciate your support, and we're here to provide interesting, valuable content for you. Thank you very much. We would also like to thank our sponsors. Thank you to McKinsey & Company, our knowledge partner. Thank you to Vodafone Business, Barclays Bank, and all of the other sponsors and collaborators who've been supporting us over the years. We love working with you guys, and we're grateful for your support. So today we have two incredibly interesting people that are going to be joining us. Hello, Chris. How are you today?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Excellent. Chris, thank you very much for joining us. And hello, Rich. Thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
Hey, Barry. Good to see you. Good, thank you.
Excellent. So we're going to dive straight into some incredibly important subjects which are at the forefront of innovation and healthcare. And then during the conversation, Chris and Rich, we're really keen to hear more about you guys individually, what you're doing, and a little bit about your careers and plans. But to begin with, Chris, tell us a little bit about digital therapeutics. What is a digital therapeutic platform?
Yeah, so a lot of people will use platform. There's certain words in industry that are kind of overused. Strategy is one of those words. Everybody does strategy. Well, they really don't, but they say they do.
Yes.
So almost every company will claim that they're a platform technology. And a lot of this came about when Amazon launched their business as a platform. You've got Google that's a platform. You've got the Apple products, which are on a platform. What it really means is that you have one set of technology through which all products are delivered and on which all products are developed, so that you're not doing anything bespoke. You're not creating products that are out there with some code that is not tied to this common platform infrastructure. And what this means is that any new features you want to add, you add to the platform. And once it's added to the platform, it can then be added to any existing products you have or any future products that you want to make. The key to this also, from our perspective, is that because we have a single platform, we can also create products in multiple languages. So we have products in 10 different languages, but they're all delivered through the same common platform. We then also create dozens of products across many different therapeutic areas, but they're all done on the same technology platform. We don't make a specific product that's not off of our platform.
Excellent.
And this is tied to another concept we talk about, which is the DTx Factory. So if you have a common platform and it has the capability to deliver and develop all products, you now can have a factory approach because you're not having to rebuild every capability every time you make a new product.
Right.
You actually just add a new capability, or you configure an existing capability on the common platform, and therefore the risk of making a new product goes way down because that code is already proven. You don't have to code something, right?
Yeah, that's very interesting.
And also the ability to do things quickly exists. So we make products, new configurations of products for, as an example, we created a rheumatoid arthritis product not long ago. Between the time that we signed the contract with the client and we had a product in testing was 4 months, right?
Wow.
So nobody can move
That's quite a dramatic change, isn't it, from the historical situation? Well, Chris, thank you for sharing. I think this platform concept is extremely interesting, and it is a bit of a departure in healthcare. So very keen to hear more about that. Rich, from your perspective, tell us, please, very briefly, who you are and where you're working. And on that theme, is Big Pharma interested in DTx? And if yes, why?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Rich Carter. I lead our digital health organization here at Eli Lilly, a global pharmaceutical company. And my role is Vice President and Chief Digital Officer, but it's really focused on digital health, not the traditional digital capabilities that support marketing and sales and some of those things. One of my colleagues looks after that area. So we're really interested in digital health and DTx because we believe in driving improved patient outcomes. And we believe the technologies and the capabilities that are now available through some of the platforms that Chris was commenting on can actually help support our molecules and our medicines and drive improved patient outcomes, hopefully reduce the burden of disease and the overall cost associated with that if we can leverage these capabilities successfully to support the patient. So very excited about how the industry has evolved in this space,
Yes.
how the global pandemic has accelerated some of that. I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit as we go, but very interested and fully agree with everything Chris said around platforms. We are following a very similar approach internally for some of our internal capabilities because of the reuse, the opportunity for speed and scale associated with those things.
No, that's very, very interesting. Thank you for sharing. And again, great to have you joining the program today. So in terms of this priority to drive improved patient outcomes, is engagement an issue here? And if that's the case, Chris, does DTx have anything to contribute in the realm of engagement when it comes to therapies?
Yeah. So when you think about, what is engagement? This is another word that you're going to hear a lot, and everyone perhaps has a different definition of it. But for us, it's a very simple concept. It's how do you activate someone to use a product? So that is getting them from the point where they hear about it and they care enough that they want to use it and then do something to be the first use. So that's activation. Getting to first use is activation. All right. And so for a digital product, that basically means downloading an app, registering as a user, and then doing the first day of activity, whatever that might be. Then engagement then follows activation. So a product that is used once has almost no value, right? It's only in its reuse that it has value, because it's only through the reuse that you're actually providing a treatment or management tool to really get people to improve their health. And in that reuse, what we're doing primarily with DTx products is we're teaching skills to people that they can practice in their life that results in behavior changes that take people from unhealthy behaviors to healthy behaviors. And those healthy behaviors can be around your thoughts and your emotions and your feelings that are leading to anxiety and depression. They can be behaviors associated with your physical activity. They can be behaviors associated with your sleep. But what we're doing through engagement is getting you to come back again and again to use the product to teach the skills, the behaviors, the habits to improve your health.
Brilliant.
Now, the challenge with this is that engagement's hard. If you look at the statistics from the web, most people download an app and use it one time. That's the norm.
Yes.
Okay. So 90% of apps out there, not just in digital therapeutic area, but in all areas, right? 90% of apps out there have no engagement.
Yep.
Okay. Then you look at what are the best in class apps. And those are things like Facebook or Instagram or other sort of apps that are downloaded and used regularly.
Yes.
And what is the measure of engagement for those apps? And it tends to be in the 30-40% range.
Oh, okay.
Again, it's not 100%. It's not even 90%, right? It is 30 to 40%.
Yes.
So now we know from the digital world, what is the level of engagement that is best in class? And now we say to ourselves, how can digital therapies achieve that best in class level of engagement? And so that's what we're focused on. And how do you do that? And the way that you do that is through game mechanics, gaming principles, behavioral economic principles, which are the same tools, by the way, that all the other digital assets out there are getting people to be engaged.
Yes, yeah.
And
No, that's extremely interesting.
The fact that we were founded by video game entrepreneurs means that we use all the tips and tricks that are being used by the best-in-class products.
Yes.
So that our engagement levels at 2 months are at 60%.
Yes.
And then at 1 year at about 40%, and then at about 2 years we're 37%. So we actually have best-in-class engagement that's similar to what you would find in the best digital assets, which when you compare it to most other digital therapies, they're in the single digits, low single digits. And part of the reason
that's fascinating, because obviously that's again I think a new aspect of healthcare, isn't it? Which didn't necessarily exist, let's say, for the sake of argument, in my parents' generation. From your perspective, Rich, does that relate to what you guys are working on? And I wanted to ask you, how do DTx products, from your perspective, in terms of what you guys are trying to achieve, improve the patient experience? And of course, therefore, I guess outcomes would be related, wouldn't they?
Yeah, and to build on where Chris was going, I think the engagement is key. I think the features that I would include and increase, coming from a pharma perspective, is really how do you leverage the medication as effectively as possible? How can we actually coach the person to use the products? You know, a lot of the molecules we produce now are a complex mode of action. They require injections or IVs, and to be able to get the patient and help them, educate them to use that medication successfully is really going to then help continue their therapy journey. If you start successfully, you're more likely to adhere to the medication, and then you're more likely to have an improved outcome. So we would build upon, you know, a lot of the engagement pieces that Chris did, but then we would apply some of our validated clinical evidence to support the patient therapy as well. And I would just expand, I think, you know, the gaming capabilities are critical. Behavioral coaching, cognitive behavioral therapy, I think, plays a big part to coach people to change their behaviors. And one of the things we're trying to do is make it as passive as possible for the patient. So if you need to collect external data, whether that's from a CGM or a blood glucose meter or other form of device, make that as passive as possible so that you reduce the overall burden for the person.
Yes.
And then if you really demonstrate value to them, there's a stronger likelihood that they will continue to use that product and then ultimately do better.
Yes. Yeah.
Let me give a stat to reinforce what Richard just said about passivity in data collection. So several years ago, I worked with a large health system in the United States that had a remote patient monitoring offering, which was tied to blood pressure cuffs and hypertension. So they did a study to determine how big of a factor passive data collection was in the patient experience. So they gave half of their patients a blood pressure cuff that automatically connected to the cloud every time you used it and sent the data directly to the cloud every time it was used. They gave the other half of the patients a blood pressure cuff where all the patient had to do was press a button to send the data to the cloud. That's the only difference. 60% of the patients would not press the button to send it to the cloud. So that amount of friction, pressing a button for a second, is enough friction to stop 60% of the people from collecting and sharing data. So passivity, to the extent that you can achieve it in whatever you're doing, is a huge value driver in any part of the world. It's not just digital, right? I mean, any sort of friction you create in an experience is going to decrease the number of people that participate in that experience.
Yes, exactly. I'm intrigued about the relationship there between the engagement, which I guess is a big promise that DTx opportunity is holding out to healthcare, and traditional Rx. So from your perspective, for example, Rich, do you see that any issues relating to that, relating to adherence and so forth from the traditional Rx world can be resolved with complementary services from DTx solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the key value propositions that we see is, if you think nobody has visibility into what the patient does when they go home from the physician's office. And if you can create digital solutions and capabilities with the right consents to access the information and the data,
yes,
you can get a real picture as to what is happening, and then we can use all of the clinical evidence and proven science to actually coach that person to use the medication successfully. If you think about some of the examples in the diabetes space where you can measure blood glucose and A1C, there are clinically validated algorithms that can actually help people reduce a lot of the complexity of the disease and actually help coach people through how to administer the therapy, what doses to take for their particular personal circumstances.
sure.
If you have the right data feeds. I think the key point in there is it has to be clinically validated for me, because then it can be trusted. Physicians will use the information and be able to make better therapy decisions for that particular individual. And
Yes.
one of the key bits for us is that feedback loop between the patient and the HCP. I think if you can provide valuable insight and information back to the physician with the patient's consent, then you have a real powerful combination, because a physician can actually make better therapy decisions to support that person.
Absolutely.
And hopefully then improve outcomes for whether it's our medication or whether it's the DTx or whatever that capability is.
Yes. Two extremely important points there: the clinical validation piece, obviously, as well as the physician piece of the puzzle, the involvement and buy-in and usability for the physician. So let's look at clinical validation to begin with, please. Chris, what's your experience there? And not only obviously the actual evidence stuff, but then beyond that, the regulatory piece. And what challenges do we have there and what needs doing?
So when you look at companies in this DTx space, you have to actually differentiate between those who are creating new science,
right,
versus those that are taking proven science and then putting that onto a digital platform. And let me explain the difference.
Sure.
So there's 50 years of evidence that shows that cognitive behavior therapy is clinically validated to treat a number of different types of conditions, okay? And you've got 20 years of evidence that shows that this is able to be done in a digital format through computers and through ICBT and whatnot.
Yes.
So what happens is there are companies like ours that say, okay, I'm going to take science that is proven, and I'm going to only put proven science on my platform as far as interventions to help patients manage symptoms or treat symptoms associated with different disorders.
Mm-hmm.
And CBT, by the way, is used in areas way beyond mental health.
Okay.
CBT has been used for pain management, for sleep management, for dealing with the symptoms of MS or rheumatoid arthritis or migraine, and the list goes on and on. So there's a large portfolio of proven science with CBT and CBT-related interventions that you can digitize and put on your platform. Now, Now, there's also science associated with the science of digitizing. So most companies that actually try to put CBT on their platform don't have enough experience to know what is engaging so that people will actually use it.
Okay.
Right? So you can take a CBT intervention that you can read into textbook, and you can copy and paste the text from the textbook and put that onto a digital format and have people read pages and pages of text and then have them try to figure out how to do it themselves.
Right.
All right. Which is actually a failure. Or you can take that and say, let me work with a clinician that actually practice this in their medical or their psychological practice. And now let me figure out how I take what they do in the real world using proven science and then digitize it, gamify it in such a way that it's fun and interesting to people, so that they will do it themselves and receive the benefit.
Yes.
So that's what the type of proven science that we apply.
Fabulous.
There's
No, that's
other
absolutely magnificent.
organizations that actually invent new science. And what I mean by that is they're not using CBT proven science. They're saying, well, I have a new mechanism of action. It's maybe playing a game a certain way, and no one's ever done it like this before. And I'm really having a different mechanism within the brain about how I'm changing people's way of thinking, changing their behaviors. And so for those organizations, they have the burden of not only proving their new science, okay, but then also proving that the patients will do it and they'll get the outcome. So from our perspective, what we do from a validation perspective is we say we start with proven science.
Yes.
We then show that our application of it gets as good or better results in a digital format as the best clinicians get in an analog format. That's what we do.
It's a really interesting. This is a really interesting area. Chris touched on the type of teams that you need to create in order to do this successfully. It's really a multidisciplinary set of skills and capabilities. You have to bring science, medical, in some cases biomechanical engineering, as well as technology professionals together to create the right organization structure, to be able to kind of actually develop these solutions. And I think partnerships in this space are actually going to be critical to success, because one company cannot do this alone. There needs to be collaboration and partnerships to actually create the best solutions for patients in these areas.
Rich, I agree with you entirely. Would you say that this is new territory for you guys as a global pharma business? The fact, I mean, clearly there's been an awful lot of multidisciplinary stuff going on for the past 100 years when it comes to discovering new molecules and testing them and producing them, distributing them, engaging with the healthcare providers. But what's new in this space?
Yeah, so we embarked on our digital health journey about 2 years ago, and we created a dedicated organization. And it's actually incredibly interesting because within the pharma company, I'm an IT professional by background. When I've been in that arena, I've typically focused on one particular area, whether that was research or commercial, and you didn't really kind of see necessarily outside of your swim lane. In digital health, I see the complete spectrum of Lilly's flywheel, from the research that Chris was just mentioning in terms of developing, whether it's digital biomarkers or capabilities, in combination with our product development, our drug development, all the way through to the manufacturing, support, engineering capabilities that you need to actually support these products and solutions when they're available in the commercial space. And it's a complex and ever-changing environment. You touched a little bit on the regulatory landscape. I think the regulatory bodies have come a long way in the last 2 or 3 years in their understanding of these type of capabilities and the support needed and some of the differences, but also some of the similarities to molecule development. So it's an interesting and constantly evolving space.
I can imagine. Quite a challenge for everybody, but extremely interesting. And then the other issue that you touched on, Rich, which I'd love to explore with both of you, is the physician, the clinician who is there at the coalface with the patient. And what are some issues relating to, obviously, we were talking about engagement, and of course, primarily the core requirement for the therapy to be successful is the engagement of the patient. But what about the engagement of the clinician? So let's start with you, please, Rich, on your views on that. And is that something specific you guys are studying or tackling?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think when we embarked on this journey 2 years ago, we were very patient focused, which is obviously where the core activity occurs. But over time, as we were talking about these products, we believe the real value is in creating that relationship between the patient and the physician with accurate data and information,
Yes.
so that they can work together to make better therapy decisions. And I think there's a couple of key things. You have to very much partner with physicians and experts in the disease area that you're trying to operate within.
Right.
Yeah, this is, I think historically in some cases, this is a little bit of a shiny object space, especially kind of from a pharma lens. We've tried to create apps and capabilities because we wanted to have an app or a capability to support a patient. Now we're very focused on what problem are we trying to help solve, and what is the capability and technologies required to do that. And if you can work with the physicians to make sure they believe that this is going to add value, that they're interested in the data and insight, and those things will be different by disease area in terms of what signals are relevant, what information is relevant for the treatment, you can actually make a powerful capability. One of the challenges we have, certainly in the US, is how do you get that data back into the physician workflow, back into the electronic healthcare record, and how do you put it in that workflow? That's a challenge that I think needs to continue to be solved. I think as patients become more empowered and have access to all of their data and will carry it on a phone and it'll be more portable, things will get better. But today it's very difficult, even with a health system who wants that information and insight, to actually get it back into a sensible workflow that enables a physician to provide better care for their patients.
Yes, exactly. How about you, Chris? From your perspective, where does the clinician feature here, and is that an important part of your own, if you will, product development map and the engagement, not in terms of patient engagement, but the whole ecosystem, so to speak?
Yeah, the challenge in digital therapeutics, the number one challenge is the physician, right? Patients are happy to do this. We have millions of people who have used our products that are happy to do it, and we get testimonials from them all the time. Payers, interestingly, have come a long way in the last few years, and increasingly they see digital as the way to gather data to support the drugs. Right. Because digital can show that a drug was taken, it can show that a patient received clinical benefit from a drug, and it can show that the patient has better well-being because of the drug. And so payers are increasingly seeing digital as a way to provide evidence to pay for a drug, not just the digital.
Right.
Regulators are on board. So the last mile and the toughest mile in all of the miles that we travel is the physician mile.
Okay? Extraordinary.
And a few years ago, I ran a panel at a conference where I had prescribing physicians that prescribed digital therapeutics. And it was in the areas of diabetes. Mm-hmm. And so I asked them, I said, doctor, how many diabetic patients do you have? He said, 500. I said, oh, great. So does that mean that you write 500 scripts for digital therapy? And he said, no, I do 100. I said, why only 100? He says, let me go through the math. He says, 100 of my patients do whatever I ask them to do, so they don't need any additional help. Now, that's kind of a false belief on his part. Going back to Richard's previous comment, there's lots of data that we would like to gather from those compliant patients, all right?
Yes.
But from the doctor's perspective, if the patient does everything I ask them to do, they don't need additional help from digital.
Yeah.
Then he said, about 20% of my patients don't do anything I ever ask them to do. So there's no way that they would ever use a digital product because they don't do anything. He said 20% of my patients are patients that don't actually have a smartphone. Now, this is about 5 years ago, and so that penetration has increased. But this idea that maybe they don't have a technology or they don't know how to use it. Which I think, in fact, I know among physicians, there's false beliefs about elderly people using technology. Doctors don't know how capable their patients are with regards to these technologies. They're making assumptions about this. All right. Then they said, this additional digital technology costs money and it's not covered by every insurance. And so if my patient can't afford it, I'm not going to prescribe it. I don't want them to have to pay for it. So he says, after you go through that triage of 2020, there's only 20% of the patients left that would benefit from a digital therapy because they can afford it, they have the technology, they would actually use it, and they would receive the benefit from it. Now, this is all the doctor's perception of that patient.
Right.
It's not actually based upon studies or facts or evidence, right? But doctors have their own way that they practice medicine, and every doctor practices medicine a little differently because it's based upon what school they went to, the year they graduated, the discipline that they're in. So there's a lot of education that we have to do for clinicians, for physicians, so that they actually provide these products to as many patients as would benefit. And they actually then use the information to improve the management of the patient. And that last part is actually, again, one of the most difficult miles to travel because most doctors are overwhelmed with data already. So if you go into the doctor and say, doctor, I'm going to have you prescribe this digital product, and it's going to provide lots of new data that you can use to manage the patient, the doctor is going to say, I don't want more data, right? I'm overwhelmed with what I've got. So you have to do it in such a way that it's really about simplifying the physician's workflow,
Sure,
simplifying the management of the patient. And that's where we really have to go with these products is how do we simplify so that we can have technology do things the doctor used to do, and then have the doctor be able to spend more time on patients that need that additional help that they didn't know about without the data to understand how the patient's progressing in their disease.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's quite profound, I think. Of course, superficially, there's an awful lot of chat, isn't there, about technology replacing doctors, which is clearly nonsense. And I think the points that you've just made, Chris, touch on that very elegantly. Thank you, and agree entirely. Hey, well, look, you guys, unfortunately, we don't have too much time left. So we'll wrap up over the next 5 minutes or so, if that's all right with you both. And like I said earlier, I wish we were both together right now in a pub, and I could buy another drink and we could continue this conversation for at least another hour or two, because it's that incredibly interesting and important for healthcare. And I love the ideas that you're sharing and your insights. But let's wrap up looking at the future and where DTx is going, the relationship between DTx and Rx. And if you, for example, have a view of what will the scenario be like, let's say, for example, 5 years from now, do we feel like there's going to be an awful lot more of these DTx solutions? Is there going to be a consolidation in certain areas or in certain business models, this type of thing? So what's your experience, Rich? What kind of conversations are you guys having on that theme?
As we mentioned, the pandemic has driven a lot of this. The investment that's gone into digital health over the last 18 months, 2 years has been phenomenal. And I think that will continue to increase. And as society continues to leverage technology, it will become part of people's lives, and that will be no different in the healthcare space or in disease treatment space. So I think this will continue. I think as a pharma company, we need to work with it. I think we can leverage a lot of the capabilities to drive improved outcomes for our portfolio. But we have to be very measured and very targeted about where we apply these capabilities so that they truly drive value and they don't become gimmicks or novelties that are just promotional in nature. I think they truly have to be clinical and validated in nature. And then I think the ecosystem will respond well and patients will use the capabilities and it will drive improved outcomes for them.
No, very good point. Like you mentioned earlier, there's been plenty of, how do you say it, shiny new things. Right. But the question is, do these innovations validly drive improved patient outcomes? And I guess in many respects, the obvious answer is yes, but not always or everywhere. So, Chris, we're talking about the future and our vision of the future, what the world is going to look like, and DTx within that 5 years from now. Where are you guys? What are you guys thinking about relating to this?
Yeah, so we think that there's one compelling truth associated with each individual stakeholder, and that one truth differs by stakeholder. And that one truth is really what drives the adoption of digital. So if you start with the patient or the consumer, That one truth is that for 20 years, the patients have been educated on digital engagement and digital value across retail, finance, media, almost every single aspect of their life except healthcare. And so what happens now in healthcare is that the consumer is saying, I want the same experience in healthcare that I have in every other facet of my life. Right. And so that's what's driving the consumers. They want the same experience in healthcare they have everywhere else. And in 20 years now, they've been trained on what to expect as far as digital. So it can't be gimmicky. Amazon doesn't win because of gimmicks, right? They win because of value. You then look at the payers. The payers are saying healthcare is 20% of the economy. It's a lot of money. I'm being paid to save money. I want to see digital used so that it shows that drugs are used. It shows that drugs deliver clinical benefit. It shows that patients have improved well-being. And then I'm going to pay based upon data about the patient that the pharma companies give me. And the pharma companies will never collect that data from a drug. They'll only collect that data from devices and from digital interaction with the patient. So the entire future of reimbursement for the drug industry is based upon digital. Now, it's not that way today, right? Yeah, it's a very strong statement, right? It's not that way today, but if you look at all the trends that are going on in the world, right, so in Europe as well as the United States, it's pushing it in that direction. So then when you look at a truth around pharma today really has no relationship with patients, right? They have some patient support programs and whatnot, but pharma wants to be more important to patients. They want to have a relationship with patients. Again, they're not going to do it through a pill. They're only going to do it through digital. So if they want to gather the data from patients to get paid, if they want to have a relationship of value with the patient, it will only be through digital. There is no other way. Mm-hmm. All right. Mm-hmm. And then from a physician's perspective, this belief that, well, technology will replace physicians. The reality is that if you extrapolate the trends of physician shortages in this country, in China, in Europe, in Africa, they're all the same, right? We just are going to have larger and larger shortages of physicians in every country of the world.
Yes.
In the United States, we could fill that gap by importing doctors from India or some other place, but that game is pretty much over with. It's spent. So the only way that we will be able to deal with physician and nurse shortages in any country of the world is through technology. Mm-hmm. So the technology that will do that is this digital technology. And that is the source of future value in the delivery of medicine to patients.
Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting points. Very strong points, but everything certainly resonates from my understanding with what you've said, Chris. Rich, are you going to have a job the way Chris is describing this? In fact, it sounds like your job's going to be growing in importance.
I think that is my job, and I agree with everything that Chris said. I think you summarized it really well. I think it is about the different stakeholders. I think it is about those needs, and data is going to drive everything in this space, which is why so many companies are investing in these technologies or partnerships or capabilities. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, look, thank you to Rich and thank you to Chris. This has been incredibly interesting. And it'd be an enormous pleasure, and I'm sure it'd be enormously valuable for all of our listeners around the world if I could invite you guys to join us maybe 3 or 4 months from now for another episode where, we got through about half of the list of things I wanted to investigate and touch on with you guys. So thank you once again. We've had Chris Wasden from Happify, and of course we've had Rich Carter from Eli Lilly. Really appreciate your time, which we are grateful for. Your time is valuable, and you guys have shared with us an enormous amount of incredibly interesting insights and important information. So thank you very much. And on behalf of all of our sponsors, McKinsey & Company, our knowledge partner, Vodafone Business, Barclays Bank, and our other sponsors and partners, we'd like to thank everybody for their support. This has been this week's episode of Healthy Innovators Live TV. which is brought to you by Giant Health. As a reminder, the website for Giant Health is www.giant.health. We're having our big annual event on the 30th of November, 1st of December. It's a hybrid event, so everybody from around the world can participate digitally if you want. So there you go, Chris. We're jumping on the digital bandwagon, and you don't have to fly to London and meet us in person. And yet, obviously, this is Europe's largest annual healthcare innovation event. We're expecting many, many thousand people to come in person, but the entire event will be available virtually. So we invite everybody to visit the Giant website and to communicate with us. We're here to serve all of you, our global community of healthcare innovators. So once again, I'm Barry Shrier. I've been your host. I hope you found this program worthwhile. Thank you to Chris. Thank you to Rich, and very keen to keep in touch with all of you and hope to see you all next week. Thank you once again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Excellent. Oh, you guys, that was so very, very interesting. Rich, thank you. What a pleasure to meet you.
Likewise, yeah.